Welcome, my name is Dwight Skull from Skull RPG, and this channel is dedicated to making better dungeon masters. So let's jump right into 5-minute campaign building. How do you get ideas and choose a story to tell? First, start with the genre of story you and your group like to play. Do you like to play fantasy, sci-fi, modern, historical fiction, cyberpunk? Then ask yourself about the overall tone of what you and your group like to play. Is it drama, mystery, horror, comedy, etc.? If you want to try something new to your group, then ask them for buy-in before you try it. Trust me, there's nothing worse than having up to half of your gaming group not be interested in helping you tell this story. But now you have your setting and overall mood, how do you get an idea? Well, the best way I've found is to consume content like YouTube, movies, books, podcasts, etc. that are in your setting or your mood. It doesn't have to be both. I think that horror or thriller is best done in sci-fi because they're already trapped. You're either on a space station or on a strange planet that can't support life outside of the facility that they've built. This helps ramp up the horror or thriller aspects of the mood because you can't escape. So if you're in a fantasy setting watching something like Doctor Who's Water on Mars, you can get great ideas on how to run something like this in fantasy. Instead of a sci-fi explanation of why you're trapped, it could be magical. Lock the players in a place where they can't escape, and you need them to have a reason to stay there. Maybe they're magically trapped, or maybe someone they care about's in danger. This last one is harder to deal with for Dungeons & Dragons dungeon masters because in my experience, the game's rule systems don't make it easy for players to like NPCs. Is this your experience? Comment about NPCs and your players' attitudes toward them below. I've only been successful a handful of times of being able to create a notable NPC, and frankly it was by accident. One time it was because I created a quirk that my group just ended up loving. In this instance, I came up with an accent, and then I just kept changing the accent from one meeting to the next, and they noticed it and pointed it out, so that became his thing, and they just absolutely loved him. And I used this to drive the story and create a race against time to save his life. Now if you've enjoyed this content so far, please hit the like button so more people will see this video. It really helps me and the channel out, and I really appreciate it. But this is just 1 or 2 game sessions, so how do you drive a story throughout the entire campaign? Look at the Marvel Universe right now as it's rebooting off of a 10-year story arc. In the last story arc, they started to introduce 5 Infinity Stones that once assembled gave the wielder godlike powers with the snap of a finger. The story, told in a spoiler-free way, is finding out about what these stones are and what they can do. And you're building up characters, both players and notable NPCs, with story arcs that help develop the characters so we know their strengths and their weaknesses, and not just their abilities, but also their personal weaknesses and strengths as well. And then next we introduce a series of villains that are all working for an ultimate villain, which we'll call the big bad guy or gal, or the BBG that, for short, you'll hear that a lot, the BBG. The players are working several game sessions, or in this case, movies, if you're talking about Marvel, to defeat smaller villains, and then at the end, in the end credits, they might give clues to the larger BBG's existence and abilities. Eventually, the BBG works to assemble his or her master plan, and it's up for the players to succeed or even fail. Even failing could spawn more of a campaign, a bigger campaign than you even imagined. And now that the BBG has assembled the stones and snapped his or her fingers and the universe has changed dramatically, what happens next? Can the players undo the past? Can they change what happened? Do they have to live with the consequences? So that choice is ultimately up for the entire group to decide, with you as the game master, kind of leading a little bit, but literally letting them tell the story. In fact, I like to let my players fail occasionally so they can feel the ramifications of what happens, because a lot of times in these role-playing games, specifically the older ones like a Dungeons & Dragons, your players are kind of set up as almost impenetrable, unkillable deities because you're not trying to harm them. Or if you're from an older group, you have the exact opposite thing, where you're making them roll up people all the time, and it becomes like a Rick and Morty type of universe where nothing matters that they do. So what I'm trying to say here is just kind of thread the needle between the 2 options and create an idea that's big enough that will be challenging, that will give you multiple little villains to fight, that will give clues to a master villain at the end of the day that has the power to do what the smaller villains couldn't do. In the process, of course, the smaller villains are letting the heroes level up and get more powerful, and also collect information that they can use against the BBG to stop his or her evil plan. I like the concept of actually having your players fail to succeed at stopping this plan, and then asking the question, what happens next? Where do your players want to go to undo the damage they did? Do they go back in time? Do they just try to repair the world as it is, it's broken? Or is things so bad that maybe those characters are killed off and you can fast forward hundreds of years into the future into the anti-utopian society that your players helped create for the next generation of heroes that your players will now play to undo basically the sins of the past? Even more fun is if they're actually descendants of their former characters. And a fun idea would be to let them inherit some sort of intelligent type of weapon or item from their actual past character. And as they grow more and more levels, that item unlocks itself for them and tries to guide them along the way. You see, the choice is sort of yours in how you do this whole thing. But where do you get inspiration? You get inspiration by watching other things and then mixing and matching them together. Also, as you're playing the game, think about ending every situation and every game session on some sort of cliffhanger. If you watch television or even movies, there'll be a fade to black or a transition to a different scene right as things are coming to a crux, right as you're getting really pumped up to see what happens. They'll just kind of leave you on this little cliffhanger. Sometimes they'll go to a commercial, sometimes they're going to go to another whole set of characters. Now, of course, you really probably can't do that much in your game, but you can leave them on the cliffhanger at the end of the night. So be thinking about that as you're building up your campaigns. Where are the natural cliffhangers in your story, and how can you get them right to the edge and then cut it off? So the next time you begin, you do a quick recap and you can start right back up where you are, and they're excited to get started. Doing that also helps focus your players so that they're not playing on their phones as much or talking about other things outside of it. I'm not saying those things are bad, but if they happen all the time or throughout like several hours of gameplay, they can be very distracting for everybody. So by leaving things on a cliffhanger and picking things back up really does help you. And what you want to do is you just want to start stringing different little ideas back onto it. If you want to see how you can do that more, please click the video right above my head. And please click the like button, as that really does help me out. Thank you guys very much. Take care.